Today's lesson, I wanted to be able to do a little bit more on these two sections because there's some problems that you'll be asked to write the equation for the sinusoid, given some pieces of information from the graph. So I kind of want to go through two of those kind of examples for you. Here, so example 1 says the sinusoid has the points pi over 4, 2 and 3 pi over 4, negative 7 as consecutive maximum and minimum values, or minimum points respectively. So that respectively means in that order. Write a sinusoidal equation that satisfies these conditions. Okay. Now here sinusoidal means either write it in terms of sine or cosine. Okay. So we can choose to use whichever. Now first it'd be nice to graph these, kind of get a decent picture. So you have pi over 4, say that's pi over 4, and then 3 pi over 4, and you have 2, and then you have negative 7. Okay, so we have those two graphed. So that means that when we graph it, this is a max, this is the min. So meaning the top of the sinusoid and then the bottom of the sinusoid. Okay, so here when you're given a min and a max, think about your sine and your cosine. You have goes up and back down for sine, and cosine starts up and goes back down and starts back for an entire period. So here, if I'm given a max and a min, if you think about those graphs, that's half of the sine or cosine graph. So you're given half of the period as of right now. So the distance between pi and 3 pi over 4, you can use subtraction to get that, would give you pi over 2. So this is half of it right now. Okay, so if I multiply this by 2, okay, that gives me a period of pi. So that's my period for this graph. So I know what my period is, and depending on which one you want to use, you need to state what the amplitude is, which trig function you're using, your k value, your phase shift, and then your also what your vertical shift is, either up or down. Okay, so we need to insert those in. Now for this is nice because you can use sine or cosine, it doesn't matter. For this I'm going to say that I'm going to use sine. And then the next problem I'll use cosine, but I'll write all the things for this. Okay. Now, choosing where you start also depends on knowing what the middle is. So we need to figure our amplitude. So the top all the way to the bottom. So going from 2 to 7, or 2 to negative 7, that gives me a distance of 9. So halfway between that is 4.5. Oh, that won't give me what I want. Sorry, I need to find the median, or the average. So 2 plus a negative 7 is what I need to do, divide by 2. So it gives me negative 5 divided by 2, which is negative 2.5. So that's my middle, which is right here. Okay? So that would be my vertical shift right there. I can plug that in. How about I erase this again and make it easier to see. So we've chosen sine x and then minus 2.5. Okay. So now I know my vertical shift, which is down in 2.5. So that gives me an amplitude from 2.5 or negative 2.5 to 2 or negative 2.5 to negative 7, which is a distance of 1, 2, 3, 4 and a half. Okay? So then that would be my amplitude. So now we just need to find the phase shift and the k value. We already know what our period is, so remember that for sine and cosine, your period is equal to 2 pi k. So if our period is pi in this case, then I can cross multiply and then solve for k. That gives me a value of 2 for my k. So I found my k. Now the nice thing here is no matter what I do for the trig function, the amplitude, the k value, and the vertical shift will always be the same for each and every equation you do for any given problem. Okay? So if I chose to do cosine, it would be the same. I guess the only thing would really change is your amp would be positive or negative value for your a, depending on where you started. Okay? Because if I started for sine here and go up first, then that means it's positive. If I start in the middle and go down first, that means it's negative. For cosine, same thing. If I start up here at the top, then that's positive. If I start down here at the bottom, then that means it's negative. Okay? So here, I think it'll be easier for us to go with this point right here and say negative 4.5. So if I do that, then I need to figure out what my middle ground is. So halfway in between pi over 4 and pi over, or 3 pi over 4 is pi over 2. So remember, this is the opposite for our phase shift. So it's negative pi over 2. Okay. Now, like I said, there's different ways of writing this. So if, let's say, I went with positive 4.5 sine 2, and I want to know what my phase shift should be, then I need to go back another fourth, because if I break this up, that's a fourth, that's a fourth, that's a fourth. If I completed this, then I would have another point here, and I'd have another point here to complete my graph, because I'm breaking it up into fourths. So the other one would be back here, so it would be at 0. So then I could say minus 0, or I could write just x. If I started with cosine, so 4.5 cosine, then that means I'm starting at the top at this max value that I got. So it would be negative, or x minus pi over 4 minus 2.5. If I did y equals negative 4.5 cosine, then that means I'm starting at the minimum that I have down here. So that would be x minus 3 pi over 4 minus 2.5. Okay? So then there's 4 possible answers. You only need one of them. Okay? So let's try it with a different problem. Okay? So example 2, a sinusoid has the points pi over 3, comma 1 and 5 pi over 6, comma 5 as consecutive minimum and equilibrium points respectively. Write a sinusoidal equation that satisfies these conditions. So here, the word equilibrium means middle. So it's the middle part of your equation. So if we graph this, let's break this up into 6. So pi over 3 was negative 1. Put it right there. And then 5 pi over 6 would be here. So then that says it was 5. Okay, so then that would be the equilibrium in this case. Okay, so this is the middle. Right now, you have from minimum to middle, so you have a fourth of your graph. Remember, it's broken up into fourths. The only reason we did the first one was a half was because we went from the minimum all the way to the maximum. So we had the minimum to the middle and the middle to the max. So we had 2 parts of the 4. So here we only have 1 part of the 4. so I only have a fourth of the graph. So then here, let's say I start with cosine in this case. Write it down here so I can expand a little bit. So let's start with cosine. The amplitude, remember, is the distance from the bottom to the top, or the middle to, the bottom to the middle, or the middle to the top. So in this case, I'm going 6. So let's start with positive cosine in this case. If I have the middle already, that means I know what my phase shift is. Okay, so, my vertical shift, which is at 5. Okay, now remember, the vertical shift is not determined by where you start, but where the middle is. Okay, so the middle in this case is 5. So then here, I want to find my period. So a fourth of the graph is from pi over 3 to 5 pi over 6. That is a distance of 3 pi over 6, which is a half a pi. Okay, so then in that case, this is a fourth, so if I times it by 4, that gets me a full period. So then I have a period of 2 pi. So 2 pi, since it's already the same as my period, my k value must equal 1. Okay? Now, to figure out my phase shift, since we're doing positive cosine, I need to figure out where the top is. So going another pi over 2, so that would be pi, that would be 7 pi over 6, and then this would be 4 pi over 3, would be the next top, so that would be at 11, all the way up here somewhere. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So at 11, 4 pi over 3, comma 11 would be that next point for the graph. Okay, so minus 4 pi over 3, remember it's always the opposite for that sign, so that would be 1 completed cosine. Okay, let's say if I did a negative cosine, so negative 6, well, we started with that with the minimum point. Remember, my k value and my vertical shift does not change. The only thing that changes for my amp is it changes to a negative. And so then my phase shift would be negative pi over 3, because that's the value at the bottom for cosine. Okay, let's say I do positive sine. So 6 sine would be 1, x blank, and a plus 5. So then here, remember, sine starts in the middle and goes up. So that's where this point is. So then at 5 pi over 6 would be for the sine. And then to find the negative 6 sine, I have to go back further. Or I could keep going forward this way, or I could go backward this way. It's more proper to stay closer to, as close as possible to your x-axis, or your y-axis for these. So if I went back a pi over 2, so pi over 3 minus pi over 2, this gives me 2, 6, and this is 3, 6, so that's a negative pi over 6. So since it's a negative pi over 6, remember that's opposite, so that gives me a positive pi over 6. And so those would be 4 possible answers. Now, realistically, there are infinite number of answers for these. So if you come up with one that's different than what I have shown, it's not necessarily wrong. And just as long as you're going along at the same points, using your fourths to get you there for the phase shift, and you have the correct amplitude attached, and you didn't change anything else, then you should be correct. Okay? Have fun.